Welcome into the Late Night Gamecock Show. I am your host, Matt Anderson, and joining me, as always, is Alex Jones of thebigspur.com. Alex, how we doing tonight?
Doing good, getting closer and closer to football season. So, the closer we get, the better it gets.
Yeah, and I'm sure we're going to talk all kinds of stuff that you've picked up being around fall camp and around the coaching staff and the fringe members of the coaching staff that are fringe fans, fringe all the way down. You're hearing everything from everybody is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
But this is going to be the last show, Alex, that we have before football season, where we're kind of taking that 30,000-foot view and looking at the program as a whole. And when I say program specifically, I'm talking about the football program, because once next week comes and the following week, it's going to be all Gamecock football. What's happened in the regular season? What's happened around the country? Are they in the playoffs? Are they not in the playoffs? Are they 10-0 going into the 11th game of the year? Are they 1-10 going into the Clemson game? We hope not. But that's what that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So I'm going to talk a lot, and Alex will chime in on the overall makeup of the roster as things stand. We got to put the finishing pieces on this 2026 recruiting class, Alex. And I know that you have some names we're going to talk about. Same thing with 2027. And believe it or not, the top 100 players are now ranked on 24/7 for the class of 2028. So I don't know how much of those, how many of those individuals in 2028, the Gamecocks coaching staff, they probably know about them. I don't know how close you're tracking 2028 right now, Alex.
Yeah, that's a long ways away. They were I guess maybe the top ranked one was today from that top 100 was Jordan Gorham, who's a wide receiver out of Timberland. He was number 35 overall and a composite 5-star. So, God, it's really good that they offered in the summer, but still, it's watching freshman highlights on these guys, and these guys haven't even taken a snap in their sophomore season. So it's still got a little ways to go, and still, as you mentioned, trying to see how they're going to finish that 26 class, and they're really kind of getting going on these 27 guys as well.
Yeah, so we'll talk all about that. If you're not a member of the Big Spur, first, shame on you. Go join thebigspur.com so you can read all the amazing articles that Alex Jones, yours truly, puts out for you on a day-to-day basis. But the one that kind of took the message board by storm yesterday was JC's revelation, based on conversation, what have you. But offensive line, man, that is not what I was expecting just 2 weeks ago. And things I've heard behind closed doors, things you've heard, like I'm not shocked by it, but we'll get into that here in a moment. But we will be talking some offensive line. Any other fall camp news nuggets that we've come across, we'll share with you. We'll talk about the preseason polls. You have the AP poll out now that came out on Monday. So we'll talk preseason polls and just some housekeeping notes. Next week's going to be our annual prediction episode. Alex and I love doing that. It's where we'll actually go through and pick every Gamecock football game in August, on August 20th. We'll pick the Gamecocks. We'll pick some other things around the country and stats, figures, things that might happen for the season.
I actually went back the other day and watched our prediction show from last year, and I think you had like 10-win season, and I had like
10-2.
Yeah. I had 10-2, yeah, and I was just sitting. I remember thinking like, what did I just do? What did I just pick? And then one game off. I guess
we're not going to talk about Florida and how you picked Florida last year. That was fun. So so that's going to be next week. It's going to be a lot of predictions and things that we could see happening, and it's so much fun. I mean, when you have an hour of essentially tinfoil hat with a little bit of what you heard mixed in with a little bit of what your eyes see, you can make some fun predictions. And then in 2 weeks, in 2 weeks' time, we'll have our full-blown Virginia Tech game preview. It's going to be all game coverage. I think Alex is working on a special guest that we will hopefully have depending on schedule. And, we're a nighttime show. So when we have guests on, they're taking time away from their family. But that'll be the show, next 2 shows. So tonight and 2 more, and it's football week, man. It's crazy how fast Labor Day's coming.
Yeah, football next week. I mean, obviously it's week 0, not too many games on, but I mean, think about it from a South Carolina perspective. I think they'll kind of do their mock game week type of stuff next week after the second scrimmage. So, I mean, it's almost here. I mean, once you get into that first Saturday, that week 0 Saturday, then it feels it's really here.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting too because I would say the lips are looser around the first scrimmage because it's not as important as who's starting, depth chart, all of that. But after the second scrimmage, you pretty much you start to hear some things that aren't changing. I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And when those things stop changing, then it's okay on to scrimmage 3 and it's game week, all that, whatever Shane has planned for this year. And then it's okay, we're in game week and these are the starters. And I'll be very, very interested, Alex, because stuff will come out. I mean, it's always going to come out. We're going to hear about it and we'll say what we can say. But I just think it's going to be really interesting, that first depth chart that's released. I can't wait for that for week 1. I want to see who all the starters are in every SEC team, every team that's on the Gamecock schedule. I love depth chart reveal, even though now it's getting worse and worse.
Yeah, we should do some type of like betting game with all 16 SEC teams. How many oars are on the depth chart throughout all 16? Because it'll probably be a lot. I mean, it's that's how it goes. But yeah, to your point about the second scrimmage type of thing, that it's kind of this week, having a good idea. I think if you think about it from a coach staff standpoint, having a good idea who your starters are going to be. And I think you try to let those guys go 11 on 11 as much as they can in the second scrimmage. And, kind of as you mentioned, things after that kind of get locked down as they move into that mock game week to kind of get ready for Virginia Tech, just because they want to have, I think things set and, chemistry building on both sides of the ball and then special teams as well. So, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to hear kind of what comes out of this scrimmage.
Yeah. Last thing we'll say, hey, Michael, happy to have you here live again. Before we get into our introduction video to the show, what about what Gamecock Traditions is doing, where if the Gamecocks run the opening kickoff back, like the very first opening kickoff, they're going to refund everybody that's bought stuff from Garnet Traditions. I don't know what day it is, if it's a specific time frame, but that is a wild. That's a lot of win and a lot of win for Garnet Traditions, but a lot of risk because they got some guys back there.
It's a lot. So my question would be, I haven't looked into this too much. Would it be the first actual attempt to run one back, or is it like if the first kickoff goes out the back of the end zone?
I don't know, but that they have greased Shane's hands. If it's you're going to defer to the second half, right, Shane?
Yeah.
Right, Shane. But
a lot of pressure on the coin toss.
Yes. All right, well, Alex, so let's get into the show. Let's do the show intro, and we'll be right back.
Gonna turn on the late night show, hear what's going down in Koreatown. I said I'm turning on late night show. Yeah, my Cox will let me down.
So, yeah, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, Alex. The big news that JC dropped yesterday on the Big Spur had to do with the offensive line. And as far as JC is hearing, what he would predict as of today, your starting offensive line going from left to right. Josiah Thompson, no shock there at left tackle. Left guard might surprise some folks. Shed Surratt Jr., true freshman from Gaffney. Might have that left guard position on lock, and we'll talk more about it in a second, Alex. But then at center, you have Boaz Stanley. Right guard, you have Trovon Bo. How do you say it?
Ball.
Gosh. Trovon Ball. And then at right tackle, you have Big Tree Bevelade. So what does that mean, Alex? First and foremost, JC said that 3 of those positions he considers near certainties to know who the starters are right now. And that's at left tackle Josiah Thompson, at center with Boaz Stanley, and right guard with Trovan.
Yeah. I think you felt pretty good about Boaz Stanley being the center and Josiah Thompson being left tackle. I think that's two that you felt really good about. And then really, coming out of spring, I think you felt pretty good about Trevon Boss' chances at right guard as well. Like, I think that's something that is not all that surprising. To be honest, I'm not too surprised about the Shed Surratt left guard stuff. Kind of heard some really good things about him in spring. And, I was just going to wonder, with him being, it's hard for a true freshman to play. But, one way you can look at is, he had to beat out some upperclassmen for that spot. If it's a projection, just if that's the way it goes, and that's the starting five. And how it ends up, like if he ends up getting that starting left guard spot, like he had to beat out some upperclassmen for that. So it'd be pretty impressive for him to do that, but I wouldn't be too surprised. And I think that right tackle is the one that, not just right tackle, but I think the question really for the offensive line in this preseason camp was what's going to happen with Big Tree. I think he's the one that, I've said, like I've kind of wondered, like, if he's going to be too good to keep off the field. You only got 5 spots, and he's not going to be center. So you knew you knew who's going to be at left tackle. So I wasn't too surprised that that's kind of a projection right now. Like I could see it happening that way, and obviously find out a little bit more about that after that second scrimmage. But I mean, I know JC mentioned in the article like the size of each of those guys. Like it'd be a very physical, kind of an SEC looking offensive line. If that's the case, if that's how it goes.
Yeah, if that's the case, I agree. And look, everything that JC said about those 3 virtual locks, I've been hearing for about 4 weeks now, I'd say. Probably 4 weeks. But the first time I heard about Shed was actually on the Big Spur. Chicken Fan's his username, but he was like, watch out for this kid. And I listen to Chicken Feed or Chicken Fan, whatever it is. I don't think I've met him in person yet, but I listen to what he says. So I circled that kid. And then all I heard was the coaching staff was raving about him when they got him on board and they saw him and they worked him through camps. Like they were like, essentially it was like, why is this guy not a 5-star?
Yeah.
And I think it was because he was a guard, honestly.
Yeah, he was really, for one, well, let's start from a high school perspective. Like you mentioned, got him from Gaffney. He was one that was probably in that 3-star range, I think, somewhere around there when they got him committed. And then he went and just had like a huge kind of senior season going into that Shrine Bowl and really kind of, caught a lot of people's attention at the Shrine Bowl. And ended up being, I think I had it up right here, ended up being a 4-star guy. Like, 24/7 has a number just outside the top 200. So, I mean, then he came into the spring and heard a lot about him and what, his chances of could potentially being in that starting lineup. And I wasn't too surprised because I really kind of liked him coming out of high school. And you could see it in the film and the way he plays. But I was wondering, how quickly could it translate just because it's a line of scrimmage league, as we all know, and it can be tough for freshmen to do that. But, I mean, if he ends up doing it, that's impressive. But it would also show, like, that they have a lot of confidence in because they wouldn't throw a true freshman in there to play an interior off the line spot in this league. Like, they would have a lot of trust in him if he's able to do that.
Yeah, and I have a couple things that, stand out to me. Just the fact that the first thing I looked at right away was all of these players have eligibility after this season. Every single player that JC is projecting, which if you want to talk about the one Achilles heel South Carolina's had forever, especially on the offensive side of the ball, has been the offensive line. And to have not only a true freshman beat out guys that have started a lot of games in college at the ACC level, mid-major level, NIAI, I mean, it doesn't matter. To not only beat out the highly ranked offensive lineman that Lonnie Teasley's recruited that you're battling with, and then also beat kids from other programs who came in who, I mean, Nick Sharp he's only given up 6 sacks in his entire career or something like that.
Yeah. And Boaz has a really good stat with that too from his last year at Troy. Like he was, I think, didn't give up a penalty or didn't have a penalty or didn't give up a sack. I had to look it up in just a minute, but it's some really good stat last year that he had at Troy.
Yeah, I mean, when you have Kason Henry and Jatavius Shivers as your backup tackles, and that's not even saying you wouldn't swing Big Tree over to left. I mean, whatever, however it all shakes out, there's going to be some swing players. But JC had a friend that I read in an article that said, that's pretty daggum good to have Kason Henry and Jatavius Shivers. I mean, Alex, I know that you and I have been impressed with Shivers since he had to come in the Alabama game. I mean, we were texting about him during the game and after the game. We thought he really performed well.
Yeah, they kind of moved the ball when he got in there, and I thought when you just kind of singling him and watching him, I thought he was really good. And I think he's been close a few times to getting that starting spot, but we've talked about this a lot. Like the depth that the way they've recruited on the offensive line, it feels like it was kind of building up to almost this season and beyond, just because they have a lot of depth at just about every spot via what they've done from a high school's perspective, but also in the transfer portal. They got imagine a guy like Nolan Hay could be one who was a first team all conference player at last year, and he could be a guy that could be a really solid depth piece for him at multiple spots on that interior offensive line, I think.
Yeah, and in the past there might have been, and John Strickland can tell you this too, but in the past there might have been 7 to 8 guys that the staff felt good about. And this goes back to 15, 20 years ago. Usually the Gamecocks have about 5 or 7 guys they feel okay about trotting out there. But looking at it this year, it looks like they could have 9, 10, maybe even 11 in a pinch, and that's huge. Now look, the starters are started for a reason, so I'm not saying that it's an all Madden team where everybody on the roster is a 99 and you're just picking 5. No, there's going to be a drop off because these guys are going to win this battle in camp for a reason. So we'll see. It's interesting to me. Alex, I'll let you start off here. Well, let's do this pretty quickly. If we don't mention a certain player, feel free to ask about it in the chat. But just wanted to rattle off some names and position groups that we've heard something about. And most of it's been good. And oftentimes if you don't hear anything, it doesn't mean something's bad. You hear about the bad stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we'll start. Yeah,
go ahead.
Quarterback.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, quarterback. Obviously, I think with Lenoris, the thing you kind of hear. This is even going back to spring practice too. Is kind of just taking that next step as an all-around quarterback, being kind of in the pocket, waiting maybe that one more second for somebody to be coming over across the middle. Just a lot of that kind of stuff that goes into all-around quarterback. I think you're seeing him take that next step, and also I encourage people to go listen to Casey Henry's press conference from yesterday because he said a lot of good things. But one thing he mentioned too was just kind of the leadership that that he's seen from Lenoris Sellers this year, kind of taking command of the system, command of the team. And I think that's something that you want to hear from your quarterback. Because I think last year with the way he got into, I think it could have been a little bit more difficult for him to get into that leadership role. But I think you started to see that later into the year. But now he had a whole offseason as being the quarterback one, and I think you're seeing him take more of a leadership role. But Cutter Woods, I think, has had a pretty solid preseason game too. You saw what he could do in the spring game, and he made some noise in the spring too. But I think you're still hearing that Luke Doty could be the quarterback too, and I think that's not too surprising based on his experience. But he's obviously doing enough and doing really enough in preseason camp to hold on to that spot.
Yeah, and I think in an ideal world, you want to preserve Cutter's red shirt. You really do want to do that. Now with Aaron Noland, him coming into the fold, if you go back to hear him talk about why he entered the transfer portal and why he committed to South Carolina, he wanted to learn behind Lenoris Sellers. So the plan has never been to race you up to second on the depth chart. It's been a developmental plan with Aaron Noland, and it started with him having to lose some weight, which has been mentioned a couple of times, and he even said it himself. But a running back, man, I'll be quick here. I heard some good stuff about Matthew Fuller. I've heard some good stuff about the transfer of Gustave. I've heard he's pretty daggum good. So we'll see there. Howell, I haven't heard much either way. Oscar Attaway is pretty much Oscar Attaway. And then, no, I don't have anything on Rasul. I don't know what's happening with Rasul.
Yeah, from a whole eligibility case, we're still waiting on that. It's crazy it's gone this long, but I got a few weeks. We'll get into all that once you get into that mock game week and how they kind of handle those practice reps. I feel like we've been talking about that for weeks on weeks now. But you mentioned Matthew Fuller. I think he's kind of taking a step forward. That's something you expect from a year or two guy. I think just kind of what I was talking about with Lenoris, but just learn to be an all-around back. You got to do the pass block and the stuff like that, the kind of minute details that go with being a running back. But as you've seen him too, from a physicality standpoint, he was ready to go last year, and I think he's continuing to get better at that standpoint. But he's one that's really interesting to watch. I think they've got some really strong competition in that room. And that was, I thought I was kind of saying that before they added Isaiah Augusta, and I think he's kind of come in and made a little bit of noise. So he's a guy that I was pretty intrigued by when they got him, seeing his highlights, and kind of just hearing more about him. I think it could be a really intriguing running back room.
The more I've dug into him specifically, because it's very recent. Most of the time I've been hearing about kids for 2 years, or the transfer portal. You hear about guys maybe 3 or 4 days before, and you get a chance to get to know them and figure out if you want them on the team. But Auguste just came so quickly. And you go back and look at it, he was a 4-star coming out of high school. He produced in his limited time at what was it, Mississippi State or no, Arkansas.
Arkansas.
And then he was a starter at Colorado. Like he's done nothing but produce. So don't sleep on him.
Yeah,
That's the word that I've gotten.
He started a few games at Arkansas, and I think you've heard this mentioned a little bit, even publicly. Like he kind of understands the league a little bit and what's expected. I think you can't have obviously we've talked about how you can't have enough running backs in their room, but that's just more experience to go along with what Faison could bring and what Attaway brings from an experience standpoint.
I'm glad that you have to talk wide receivers and what we're hearing, because that is one of the biggest question marks of the preseason camp. Is a freshman going to overtake a starter?
They could, but I also think the returners have had really good camps too. Like you hear, from Mazio Bennett, like you hear kind of the stuff just from a public standpoint, like what he says, like, taking, that next step from a physical standpoint, from a mental standpoint, but also from a leadership role. And I think he's had a good camp. Same for Jared Brown. And now, we, got to see a little bit of some, not one-on-ones, but, quarterback, wide receiver going through some routes. And it was on air, but, sitting there watching Nick Harbor run a route, and I think we may have video of it's up somewhere, but the route just kind of looked a little bit more cleaner than it has in the past. And when you watch them, and I think that's something that you're seeing just from having the sole focus on football. And that's another thing. You go listen to what a lot of those guys, Mazio and Shane Beamer said about Nick Harbor and kind of, what he's had to do and kind of sacrifice, putting down one of his loves in track to go all in and pour it all into football. And I think you're starting to see that pay off. And now it's just from a game time perspective, taking it to the field. But, those freshmen, I think you heard a little bit about Jaden Sellers from this past scrimmage. I think he had a really good, I know you're going to like that being a South Florence guy. Like you heard a little bit about that. Donovan Murph, we talked about last week. I think there wasn't much of he's having to catch up when he got to camp just because he's a summer enrollee. Like I think he kind of just picked up right where they left off. So that's that's a few of the freshmen that I'm hearing the most about, and Brian Rowe too. I can't forget about him. Like he's also having a pretty good camp and saw what he could do in the spring. So it's from what we're going to see in game one perspective. Like this is just a guess on my part, but from a starting perspective, I think you probably still see the veteran guys out there, but they're going to rotate so heavy in there. And then it's just from a freshman standpoint, like we've seen what most of the returners can do. And don't forget about Drake Jacobs either. I think he gets kind of forgetting about it, and I think he has got a chance too. But I think it's just when you get those freshmen under the lights and Mercedes-Benz, like can they take that from the practice field to the game? Just because that's tough for any freshman, and that's going to kind of be the big step.
That must be why all those Texas kids come in ready for college, because they play in the Dallas Cowboys Stadium or something like that. The only thing I'll add at wide receiver is with the freshman stuff, all six of them have popped one way or another at different times. And just because you hear more about Donovan Murph right now, part of that could be because he wasn't practicing, during the fall. But I mean, they have their good days and their bad days, but most of their days are good. And just because you don't hear about Brian Rowe anymore because he was the talk of 6 weeks ago doesn't mean he's slacked off or anything, or he's in the doghouse.
And just to add to that real quick, listen to Mazio talk about it yesterday. Like they've really kind of embraced the freshmen, I think, just coming in. Like, Mazio specifically talked about how he's taking them under the wing and knows he has to be a role model for those guys, because he kind of said, kind of paraphrasing, but he kind of said, no, if I got to do what's right so they know what's right, or got to do the routes right because I know they're watching me. So I think they've really kind of taken those freshmen on the wing. And I think that competition has really helped everybody involved. The freshmen are pushing those returners to continue to get better, but then those returners are pushing the freshmen and kind of showing them everything as well.
Oh, I agree. I mean, tight end, I'm not going to spend any time there. We talked a lot about offensive line. We talked a lot about offensive line just a moment ago. Tight end, the one thing I'll say is, between the defensive backs rooms and the tight end room, that's where I have the most confidence on this entire team. And what Michael Smith was able to do last year, just from a raw skill standpoint and not really being strong enough, and now he's transformed his body.
Yeah,
I was actually watching the South Carolina Kentucky game over the weekend. I go back and rewatch random games, see different things. Mm-hmm. And how many times was Michael Smith just in the right place at the right time on Lenore's fumbles?
I know. That's some of that's just a little bit of luck being in the right spot, but it's also knowing the game and things like that. And to your point about the tight end defensive back room, I think tight end's probably the position you feel, other than outside of quarterback, tight end's probably the position of offense right now that you feel best about going into the season. Just because, I think, as you mentioned, Michael Smith, if Josh Simon wasn't on the team last year, I think Michael Smith plays an even bigger role than he did and probably puts up even more stats. But they had Josh Simon, who was one of the best tight ends in the SEC for what he could do.
And he got banged up too.
Yeah, and he got banged up too. But he saw it in the Missouri game. He had that the touchdown catch, and he just as you mentioned, it seemed like he was always in the right spot, either for fumbles or for a check down. He'd be in the right route or just somewhere open in the middle of the field. So I think he's got a chance. And he's one guy being at these open practices that when you look at him, you can tell he's physically made a jump too. Like you couldn't see that in the spring just because he was out. Not doing much during spring practice, but he's been one guy physically that stands out. And I think he's got a chance to have a good year. But then you hear some talk about Brady Hunt as well in the jump he's taken as well. I think he just continues to get more comfortable in the system and all that. So, and then Maurice Brown, another one too. So I think he could be an interesting one to watch as well. He shows what he can do on special teams. I think now the next step is seeing what he can do from an offensive standpoint. I mean, Sean Elliott's talked about how explosive he is.
Zero-star kid. Kid.
Yeah, I mean, physically is probably one of the more put together guys on the team when you see just from a height and weight standpoint. So it's a really intriguing room. I think they got a lot of depth, and you throw in a Mike Tyler in there, who's a true freshman, who's kind of coming into his own too.
Yeah, like I said, we already talked about offensive line, defensive line. Alex, throwing some quick hitters here. I mean, Dylan Stewart. Everything I've been told is that he's just taking his game to an even higher level and understood what he did do from a physical standpoint, mental standpoint. He did it all. So good luck. Put 3 guys on him is what I'm hearing. Other teams are gonna have to do.
Yeah, I've also heard Dylan Stewart just kind of taking it to the next level, and I think that's not too surprising because even with what he did last year and how he played, I think you saw some of the areas he continued to get better at a run stopping standpoint. I think just getting bigger and stronger is going to help him more from a run stopping standpoint. But from the rest of that, Sterling Lucas room, I think the one name you hear a lot too, outside of like a Brian Thomas Jr. or somebody like that. You hear a lot about Anthony Addison and what he could potentially bring. I think you kind of when you watch these guys talk about, they all rave about how hard he plays, the motor he plays with. I think it's just continuing to get bigger and stronger for him being as a true freshman. But I think he's got a solid career ahead of him, and I think anything they can get from him is just a plus this year to go along with what they have in the rest of that room.
Yeah, the thing I've heard, especially on the defensive line, is they know that Dylan Stewart's going to cause so much havoc that they just got to get somebody that's above serviceable over there, and they'll feel okay. But they think they have some really good guys that when the lights come on, they'll see what they think that good things will happen. I think they might have 4 to 6 defensive tackles that they feel okay about. Alex, I don't think it's going to go more than 5. I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm hearing any of them are elite. I've heard good days and bad days. But the skill set's there, the potential's there, is what I've heard.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a room that gets better as the season goes on, and obviously they'll have to start pretty quick. To kind of what we talked about from a schedule standpoint. Where we think South Carolina can get to, but I think that's the one. D tackle is going to be the spot that everybody's going to be watching. But we say that, and I think that's something that they're kind of feeding off of in that room is that everybody's saying what they lost with T.J. Sanders, Tonka Henley, Boogie Huntley. I think they're kind of feeding off that, have a chip on their shoulder. And Nick Barrett's a guy who I think has kind of taken it to the next level too. And I'm really interested to see Monkel Goodwin because I thought he flashed as well. And then Gabriel Brownlow-Denny's a guy that I think has the talent and probably he may start to put together. And we've seen kind of the development that Travion Robinson can do with those interior defense tackle guys. And from a rotation standpoint, when you think about it last year, especially when they really kind of figured things out, like they had 4 or 5 maybe that they were rotating in there with the 3 guys that had left. And then DeAndre Jules, and then Monkel Goodwin. That was kind of the 5 they were really rotating through there. So I think that's kind of the ideal number they're looking for.
I'm with you there. I think at linebacker, Fred Johnson, for me, Alex, it's been almost like Lenore Sellers hype. Mm-hmm. I know I saw Sellers with my own 2 eyes in high school and had, felt like he was pretty daggum good. Best high school quarterback I've ever seen. Best high school player I've ever seen, bar none. The best one before that was Bobby Wallace. Our football team kicked it to him one time to start the game, and they were ranked number 15 in the country or something. It was Conway back in the day. He returned the opening kickoff for a touchdown, and then he touched the ball 2 more times, once on a catch and once on a run, and scored all 3 of their touchdowns. Only 3 times he touched the ball. Kicked to him once, and he rushed, and they just, I don't know how they kept him a bit down, but South Florence won the game. But yeah, so Fred Johnson, kind of like Lenore Sellers, just one of these guys I'm hearing just rave reviews about. I heard it last year. I don't think there's much worry in the coaching in that room, especially with Clayton White and him coaching the linebackers. Sean Murphy, his name keeps coming up. It comes up all the time.
Yeah, you heard a little bit about him in the spring, but I think the more you kind of progress through the summer, you start to hear his name more, and hearing it a lot. Like I think he's got a chance. Like if I'm projecting saying that South Carolina's in a 4-2-5 to come out on the first play of defense, like I think I would project Fred Johnson and Sean Murphy to be the two linebackers.
Yeah.
But I think Justin Okoronkwo is also kind of coming into his own too, and I've said this on this show and other shows too, like. I wonder if Donovan Darden can be the guy that's like a Fred Johnson that plays the Fred Johnson role of last year. But there's some other guys in there too. Like I remember, talking to some of those guys and, like the upperclassmen at Media Day. And I think AJ Holloway was mentioned as one as making plays as well. So they got a lot of linebackers in that room. And the future, looks bright from that perspective. But, from, what they can do this year, like, Fred Johnson, I think, I think he kind of has it all, like the size, like the way he can move for his size. He can get east to west. He can run down, make plays downhill. So it's really intriguing to see what he can do. And I think
he can hit.
Yeah.
Defensive back, I'm not going to spend really any time here, Alex. We have covered this ad nauseum. I feel really good about every defensive back that's on the team, every single one. I feel great about Torian Gray. I feel great knowing that Jeff Collins is going to be back there with Torian and Jalen Foster's back there, and then the other guy, the other analyst, like they're in good hands.
Yeah, I think it's that safety spot you're still watching with Peyton Williams and David Busey. I think both of those guys are going to play a lot regardless. I think David Busey's had a really good camp, and I think Peyton Williams is almost a veteran with the way he's been in the system, and when we've said it a whole bunch of times when his number's been called, he's made plays. So I think you're going to see both of those guys a lot. I'm really intrigued to see both of them, but from the rest of that secondary standpoint, like they got a lot of different options. Like I think you could you still question, like not question, but like wonder what they're going to do with Brandon Cisse. I would guess probably starting at that other corner spot, but he can play so many different spots. That dude's going to be playing. Like you can say, he's going to be playing. It's just I think they can move him around because he's so versatile, and it's going to be interesting to see. Then you can throw Vicari Swain and Miles Norwood, who I think have also had really good camps as well at that quarterback spot.
Yeah, and all the guys that as well have had good games.
So. You could keep going on in that second with all those guys.
Well, Alex, let's hit a sponsor break real quick. Before we do so, just a reminder, there are 10 shows on the Chief Sports Network. All of them are fantastic. We know that Alex and I are your second favorite show, or maybe your third favorite or your fourth favorite, but there are so many good shows on Chief Sports Network, and really excited for what's going to be happening on Saturday night SEC or SEC Saturday. Those guys are fantastic, and I can't wait to hear someone just focus on the SEC, but knowing that there is a little Gamecock slant. You don't get that in national media. So
the high school show coming on Fridays too, I think.
The high school show is going to be awesome, man.
Yeah.
People slip on how much high school football matters in the state of South Carolina. It's not just baseball. And, there's some regions that basketball is really important, but
to that point, like I've been to a few scrimmages here, high school scrimmages, see some in-state guys, and like scrimmages matter too. Like you can see how much high school matter. Like, it's really fun to watch. Just from a recruiting perspective, but I think high school sports are really fun to watch, and really interested to see how tune into that show as well.
Yeah, it's gonna be fantastic. And you all know about the daily shows, so I'm not gonna spend much time there. But support JB and Mike and Phil and JC, and we're guests on those shows, so we appreciate it too. But Alex, let's go ahead to sponsor, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about the future.
JC Sherbert here had a brilliant idea that some good friends of mine in Florence have told me about. Next time you're having a wedding or an event, or anytime you got to feed a bunch of people, talk to my friends over at Flavortown Eats and Events. That's right. It's a food truck / trailer, prepares the food fresh on site right there for you. No hassle. It's absolutely delicious. They'll come out, turnkey solution to feed the masses at your event. Go to their website right now. flavortownflow.com. That's flavortownflow.com. They have all the contact information you need, and they are a proud sponsor of the Late Night Gamecock Show and the Chief Sports Network.
Absolutely. Check out Flavortown Flow. I've had numerous things catered for me and my family. Kirby and his staff are the absolute best. They will treat your guests or whatever your event is like they are royalty. It is top notch. It's full service. It's great. So reach out to Flavortown Flow and go talk to Kirby Anderson there. But Alex, this is the last time we're going to talk about this for a while, and we're going to be talking about how solid is the footing of South Carolina's football program going to be after this upcoming season. If the Gamecocks do what we think that they can do, Alex and I probably would both agree that the playoffs are on the table, and that makes 2 years in a row that the playoffs have been on the table. Don't you want to make that a every year type situation or a 4 out of 5 years situation? So we're going to be looking at the future here. The way I did this, just so you know, I'm doing the blue chip ratio. I think it's pretty cool, and it has a little bit of a proven track record. So what my assumptions were for the year after this, all players that are not seniors, redshirt seniors, or 6-year players are going to return to the team next season. So unless you're getting kicked out of school, you're going to be there. All 2026 recruits play at South Carolina next season, which is another thing that, I'm not expecting any decommitments. I'm not expecting that at all. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that's my assumption. And then I'm using each scholarship player's last composite star rating as their rating for the blue chip ratio. So if you were a 2-star coming out of high school, but you were a 4-star in the transfer portal, you are a 4-star in the way that I'm doing this here. And if you were a 4-star in high school and you were a 3-star as a transfer, you're a 3-star. So that's how I did this, Alex. But I do want to talk to you about it. I think you'll be surprised by some of these numbers. Next year, and we'll talk about Lenoris and everything later. But next year, if everyone eligible returns, you have a blue chip ratio of 75%.
That's pretty good.
That's really 3 out of 4 guys. You got Ayer, you got Lenoris, and you have Landon Duckworth. 3 out of 4. And then Cutter, who's performed like a 4-star.
Yeah, I was about to say, you could probably, from a recruiting ranking standpoint, you could even throw, not from obviously his rankings doesn't say so, but like the way you hear about him and things you hear about him, like you can throw him like almost like 100%, blue chip, pretty close to it.
Yeah, if you look at the offensive line room, there are 14 players that are eligible for next season. 8 of them are composite 4 or 5 stars. So that blue chip ratio is 57% in the offensive line room. So hats off to Lonnie Teasley, Greg Atkins, all those guys, Darren Usher for that. South Carolina's never had an offensive line room like that ever. The tight end room, there's going to be 4 players eligible. 2 of them are composite 4 stars. So that's a blue chip ratio of 50%. The wide receiver room is ridiculous. If all these guys are on the roster next year, you'll have 10 players in that room. 8 of them would have been composite 4 or 5 stars. So an 80% blue chip ratio. The running back room, 2 of the 4 players will be 4 stars. So that's 50% blue chip ratio. So on offense next season, if everyone that's eligible to come back comes back, 21 of the 32 players are composite 4 or 5 stars. So a 66% blue chip ratio on offense.
That's really good. I'd be interested to look back at, the numbers of what, maybe even those Spurrier teams, those 11-win teams were from a blue chip ratio standpoint. But even when you think about, what could happen from a departure standpoint, obviously, we're talking so far ahead here, but it still has a chance to be really good from that perspective. If, you lose who you think you could lose from an offensive standpoint, but it's kind of funny looking at the wide receiver room like that. Room took a huge boost in this last class from a blue chip state. All 6 of them pretty much to go along with Mazio Bennett and those guys. But I think you see the future. Like you can see offensively, there's obviously you talk about the offensive line. They've recruited really well there and have a pretty big decision coming up next Friday. And that would definitely help the blue chip ratio in that room as well.
Yeah, I'm not laughing really, but I am kind of laughing. Nobody hates that blue chip ratio in the wide receiver room quite like Justin Stepp does. God, he finished second for so many people. It's just wild how that room is flipped. But looking on defense, we'll do this quickly and then we'll have an overarching conversation. Next year, there's going to be 18 guys in the DB room, 8 of which are composite 4 stars. So that's a 44% blue chip ratio. At linebacker, you're going to have 10 players in that room next year, 4 composite 4 stars, so 40% blue chip ratio. You look at the edge and edge rusher, that's what South Carolina puts them on their official roster.
Mhm.
But there you're going to have 6 players eligible next season. 4 of them are 4 or 5 stars. That's 67%. And then on the defensive line, 5 players eligible next season. 4 of them are composite 4 stars, 80% blue chip ratio. And then defensive tackle, 3 players eligible next season. One's a composite 4-star and 33% blue chip ratio. I didn't have Aiden at defensive tackle quite yet. So that's why there's only one 4-star in that defensive tackle room. But so on defense, you're talking about 21 of 42 players eligible next year being blue chip. So 50% over minus, just kind of looking at it overall plus minus. That's 42 out of 74 players for a 56.7% blue chip ratio as they stand for next year. Remember, with the blue chip ratio, anything over 50% means that you can contend for a possible national championship, and anything above 57% means that you are a national championship likely type team. So that's some solid footing, man.
Well, I was sitting here thinking about the secondary and the guys that, we're probably penciling in as starters. Like, out of that group, you're for sure losing one with DQ Smith, being out of eligibility. Kilgore would be the one that would be in question just because if he has another really good season, he could be a high draft pick. But that, even if he doesn't come back, you still have a lot of guys who still have eligibility left. And if you throw in a Kilgore who comes back, like, you're still, with the way we're talking about this secondary, it's one that, they're going to be on solid footing for a long time with what they could have next year, and then for the years to come with the way they recruited. And the defensive tackle, I think you're starting to see the recruiting, really kind of pick up there too. Obviously, you didn't mention Aiden or didn't put Aiden Harris in there, but he's a guy that, he's, one of the top recruits in their class right now overall. So I think you're starting to see, that really pick up there. And, we've seen what Sterling Lucas can do from a recruiting standpoint. That's why you don't expect that to slow down. And really, and then you look at linebackers too, like they've really kind of, hit their stride there. They've got, this linebacker class and these next classes coming up are really good. Like, they got some really, guys, and we'll get into kind of certain names here, in one of these next few episodes or something like that. But you see the potential of what it could be just from a foundation standpoint, really on both sides of the ball. But defensively, you see the foundation there, and they can just continue to build it.
It's something crazy. That's 81 players. No, so what I say it was how many? 74. So there's 7 more players that are on the roster right now, Alex, that are special teams, either long snapper, kicker, punter, what have you. So looking at that, the Gamecocks really only have room for 4 more new players if everything I said holds. But, that's going to fluctuate. Everything's not going to hold. Like I said, I'm not expecting any decommitments. There are going to be transfers from this year's roster. I guarantee it. You want to keep everybody you want to keep, but there are some people you don't mind walking out the door if they feel like it's in their best interest. Obviously, South Carolina honors all scholarships.
Yeah, and if South Carolina has a season that, they could potentially have, like, South Carolina's in the playoff, like, I think you feel pretty good about in the Laura Sellers, because that means he had a really good year, and, he's probably then got a good chance to be a high draft pick. Same thing for like a Jalen Kilgore. And then, I'm kind of saying about this defense that everybody says, a lot of the talk is that they lost a lot, but, I've heard Cole Kubelik say this. I've mentioned this on here and in the show. Like, it seems like, these past few years, South Carolina has had, 1 or 2 guys that have come out of nowhere that have gone on to become draft picks. Last year was Kyle Kennard and Demetrius Knight. Like, everybody in South Carolina knew who those 2 guys were, but from a national perspective, they weren't all that known. Then they just, skyrocketed up draft boards until they performed. So you're going to see guys, I think, probably just, kind of come out of nowhere and rise up. And could Judge Collier be a guy that's like that going into his junior year? He's got the measurables for it and kind of taking the next step. I'm interested to see. But, just with all that being said, and kind of like I mentioned a minute ago, like the foundation is definitely there on both sides of the ball. Now it's just continue to build that through high school and transfer portal rankings.
Yeah, even though they only have room for 4 people, there's going to be some guys that transfer out. There's going to be some NFL guys like you talked about. Now, I could see a situation where South Carolina makes the playoffs this year. They don't win the national championship. I can see Lenorse coming back regardless of NFL stuff just because that blue chip ratio is pretty daggum good. That's a chance to win national title.
Right, just because they made the playoff, I don't think that means that he would be gone. Like and all this is like we'll dive into all this later. But
there's gonna be 15 to 20 new names on this blue chip ratio when I do it this time next year when we talk about it. So, but it's just pretty special to see what Shane and his staff have been able to accomplish. Alex, let's go ahead and talk some recruiting. I just laid down the foundation. They only have 4 spots. So, Alex, how are they going to fill those 4 spots in 2026?
Yeah, we'll see. The board's really kind of, they've kind of, I think the 2 guys that right now are Darius Gray, the 5-star lineman from Richmond. He's deciding next Friday. It really kind of seems it's coming down to South Carolina LSU, and it seems like South Carolina has some momentum in this one. And I think they've had it for a little while, but really interesting. He'll be announcing next Friday, and 5-star offensive lineman, one of the best interior offensive linemen in the country. And if they're able to land him to go along with Zion Giles, like that's 2 really good to go along with the rest of what they have from a Kamari Blair and Anthony Baxter.
Anthony Baxter. But what I'm going to say really quick, Alex, before you move on down the line, the things that I'm hearing about Darius Gray right now are the same things I heard about Nick Harbour and the same things I heard about with Dylan Stewart. And what I mean by that is months and months and months ago, someone told me South Carolina was going to get Darius Gray, and it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed, which is crazy to me. But anyway, so yeah, I do feel good about Darius Gray. That could be a potential huge thing for South Carolina. Yeah,
absolutely, and that would go along with the rest of how they've recruited in that line room. Would just be another step forward if they would have landed him. Caden Ramsey's the other one that's uncommitted wise that they're going hard after, and we'll see kind of how long that one continues to drag up. I think South Carolina's in a good spot and kind of really intriguing guy just from a measurable standpoint of what he can do. Be another if they're able to land, he'll be another good in-state guy. I think that guy you can see what you can see what they see in him, and just from a tight end perspective. And then you're obviously, when the season gets going, you're going to have everybody talking about, who can South Carolina flip. Like, still probably a little bit early for that to talk about that, but that's when you start following the visits to see, where all these guys are going to visit. And then obviously it seems like you always have guys kind of pop up senior season wise and see, kind of evaluate that film, the senior film on some guys. So, you'll kind of see the board kind of, I think you see who they're going after right now. Then we'll see kind of mess with the board to see how it goes.
Yeah, as far as 2026 goes, Alex, I would be surprised. I wouldn't be shocked if you see this class get past 6 more guys. I think 6 is kind of like that upper limit because,
it goes back to what we've been talking about from a future standpoint, and like it's a young team when you look at it kind of overall from a senior standpoint. Like they still got a really young team, and that kind of goes to what the foundation standpoint that we talk about. Like, it doesn't have to be, it almost can't be a really big class like some of these other teams are taking just because you want to save spots for a transfer portal needs.
Yeah. So Alex, that's 2026. Well, look, we're still going to talk 2026 recruiting. When news pops up and we get visitor lists and all that, we're still going to talk recruiting. But like I said, a lot of it's going to be heavy into what's happening on the field. Alex, 2027's here, man, whether you want to believe it or not. We're not living in 2025. We're living in 2027. So give some early names Gamecock fans should be looking at, where defensive tackle is a huge one. There are people are always going to want defensive tackles, offensive line. But you go wherever you want to go, man. Explore the studio space.
Yeah, so now, I think, arguably probably a top guy on the board is going to be Joshua Dobson, Catawba Ridge cornerback, 5-star guy. Probably is going to be the number 1 overall cornerback or number 1 cornerback in that class. I mean, you saw it. We've talked about it. We both saw him that day at Carolina. Like he was really good, and you're starting to see that. And it's going to be a battle for him just because, I mean, he's going to probably be able to go to whatever school in the country he's going to want to go to. And I mean, there's going to be a lot of schools coming after him. So that's going to be definitely one name to watch. Like another one, I'm just going down here through the list. Like from an in-state perspective, like it's another really good class. Like this 26 class was good. The 27 is going to be another one. You got 2 guys in Irmo, Jaden Bryant, the edge, who's a high 4-star guy. They got Nate Carson, his teammate there, who is also really good. From a running back perspective, there's 2 offers out there from in-state guys, and Trey Segar from Burns, who I know you're really high on for what you've seen, and Aiden Gibson. Saw both of those guys last Thursday at Woodruff at a scrimmage, and both are really good, and they both are going to be guys that are going to be highly recruited. Like Cigar is a 4-star guy right now. Gibson, doesn't have a ranking for 24/7 Sports, but he'll get one. Could see him show up in Atlanta. That's going to be something that's going to be interesting to watch from a recruiting perspective. Which guys show up in Atlanta for the Virginia Tech game? In-state perspective, that's kind of the guys right there. I'm probably forgetting about somebody. Seth Tillman, that's another one to keep an eye on too. Defensive lineman from South Point. Saw him the other night at scrimmage going against Ridgeview, and he was really good. He looks the part and looks like an SEC defensive lineman. So in-state, I think that's where it's all going to start. Then you're going to obviously have your kind of those top out-of-state target guys. One that always kind of pops out to me from an offensive line perspective is Joshua Sam Appel, who they've been in a pretty good spot for a while. But this guy is 6'9", 340 pounds. A 4-star guy, like just massive, and they've been on him really early. Got on him really early. They're in a really good spot. Like I think Georgia's also making a run too, but South Carolina's been a really good spot for him. So that's kind of
Well, really quick on that kid, Alex, that you talked about from Georgia. This was a kid that tried to commit like 2 or 3 times to South Carolina already. And it's not because they don't want to take him. They just know that once he sees other schools, it's going to become recruiting all over again. So, I shouldn't say 2 or 3 times. I know he wanted to commit on his official visit a recent visit like last year after a football game or something. I can't remember, but he wanted to commit, or maybe it was camp. I can't remember. All the days blur, but, JC now thinks let's see if he gets out of Georgia. So we'll see.
Yeah, I just throw a few other names out there. KJ Green's a guy that's going to be one of their could end up being one of their top edge prospect guys. He's one that I think is probably a mid 4-star right now, and going to be one that you have to watch. Like again, Georgia, just because Stone Mountain guy, like they tend to not let guys out. Like it sounds like maybe Alabama could be one too to watch there, but he's a really good player, and so you obviously you're starting to see kind of their guys kind of forming in that range, but it's still early for that 27 class. You're going to see a ton more names kind of emerge there.
Yeah, in 2028, Alex, I did see that Cam in the chat said Timberland High School has a class of 28 5-star wide receiver.
Yeah, Jordan Gorham. So 24/7 Sports released their initial top 100 for the 28 class today, and he was number 35. And from a composite perspective, that's a 5-star. They offered him a camp. I think it was like June 5th to June 6th. Guy that's I think in that 6'3" range right now, and really intriguing. But he also it's so early for the 28 guys. They don't even have sophomore tape right now. So he's going to be one that's going to be interesting to watch, just kind of how he continues to progress. Because from a physical standpoint, you already start to see what they could like from a 6'3" kind of perspective.
Oh yeah, class of 28 just blurs my mind, but I'll get up to speed there soon, Alex. Alex, I'll be honest. I see Craig's some question here. I'm gonna get to some questions here in a minute, y'all. But do y'all think Shane was talking about Watkins when he said he couldn't cover the smaller receiver that is on campus from the upstate? Can't remember name. I'm guessing this is the press conference. Full disclosure, all I've watched of the press conference was Shane defend his wife's cookies, which he did for a very long time, which I would do the exact same thing for my wife. So kudos to Shane. Good job. But do you have any idea what Craig's talking about? I just haven't seen it.
I'm trying to remember exactly what he said. Who knows who he's talking about on that one. I know I can picture in my mind what he was saying, but I can't fully remember.
Do you think he was talking about any specific recruit, Alex? You can say yes or no.
I don't know.
Yeah. One thing I'll just say, I'm looking over the comments now. Michael says, who wouldn't want to be on the other side of Thompson? Yeah. Gray is going to be a guard, but if he's right beside Thompson, I'm sure he'd love that. Craig said LSU spent so much in the portal. I think we can pay Gray. Craig, I'm just going to say real quick, I think that is settled. I think that is not an issue at all with Gray, that his needs would be fulfilled at the University of South Carolina. Get one or the 2 running backs in state, if not both, for 27. Yeah, Craig, Alex mentioned those 2 guys. I see some Clemson talking here. We'll get to that. Thomas, real quick, we talked about Brownlow Denley a little bit earlier, but he's shown some flashes, and Travian's trying to get the most out of him from a ferocity and domination aspect. Looking through here. Yeah, let's go ahead. If you have any specific questions that we haven't got to, please go ahead, throw them into the chat box. We'll get to them before we get out of here. Alex, one thing we do need to talk about now is the coaches and media preseason poll. I broke it down here, just comparing the two. Texas number 1 in both polls, Georgia number 5 in the AP, but 4th in the coaches poll. Alabama 8th in both. LSU 8th in both. South Carolina 13th in both. Florida 15th in the AP, 17th in the coaches. Oklahoma 18th in the AP, not ranked in the coaches poll. A&M 19th in the AP, and A&M is 21st in the coaches. Ole Miss and Tennessee are pretty different. AP and coaches. Ole Miss 21st in the AP, 15th in the coaches, and then Tennessee 24th in the AP, 18th in the coaches. So a long way of saying this, Alex. 10 of the top 25 teams in the preseason AP poll are in the SEC. I don't want to hear about schedule. I don't want to hear it.
And South Carolina plays, 6? I think top 25 preseason teams. Is that what I saw? I think it's
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, but you have 6 from the Big Ten. I've never said the Big Ten's a bad conference. I think the Big Ten's pretty daggum good. 4 for the Big 12, only 3 for the ACC, 1 independent, that's Notre Dame, and then 1 Mountain West for the AP poll. They're on the schedule, y'all. That team from the upstate is 4th in the AP and 6th in the coaches poll. So, Alex, do we think they messed anything up? Wrong order, too high? I'll go first on wrong order because I kind of have my thoughts right here in my head.
Yeah.
I think that the top 8 teams are probably in a tier. Then 9 through, let's say, 15 are probably in a tier. After that, I don't really care. Take 16 through 35, and I think they all have similar records and similar big wins and losses. But your take on wrong order, how'd you feel about it?
I think you may have had this in the notes, but I agree. Like Miami being at 10, seems that's pretty high. Just because they were so good last year and weren't able to really do a whole bunch with it. And then you got Arizona State and Illinois right there, and I think that's 2 teams that you'll find out about it's one of those 2 of those teams you want to see them play kind of early on. I think you probably say the same thing about South Carolina too. But with the AP poll and really with both preseason polls, it can be just kind of all. It's always interesting to see just because I think so many different things are kind of into how much are people looking into the rankings just from are they looking from does the team have a returning quarterback or not? I think it's just so many different things that go into it. But
yeah, I mean, one team I'll give you really quick. I think it's too high. You kind of mentioned some of them. I'll hit the ones you missed. Clemson, I think, is too high for a team that finished 14th in the AP poll last year. Returns everybody. They're getting a big boost returning everybody. We've talked about Clemson in the past where I think Clemson's on a downward trend, not because of a Gamecock glasses or anything like that, just because you look at their wins losses. I don't think this would be a good time for Clemson to join the SEC or the Big Ten. But look, this is the same team, and we talked about it. It's either going to be the coordinators or the players, and they couldn't beat the teams that were ranked ahead of them last year, and I don't think they can this year. But I think at the end of the season, if the AP poll is voting on who's going to have the prettiest record at the end of the year, yeah, I mean, Clemson only has 3 teams that are ranked on their schedule this year in the regular season. But if they're actually saying who the best teams are, I can't get behind Clemson that high. I think they're top 15 for sure, but I can't get over being that high. I think Florida's too high. DJ Lagway has to show me something. I mean, he was inconsistent. He's got to stay healthy, but yeah, I think 15 is the ceiling for Florida.
I was going to say the healthy thing about DJ Lagway. I think that's key, and I think he's already kind of battling that a little bit in preseason. I just think that's, and I mean, it helped us kind of with every team too. But I think specifically with Florida, just from a health perspective.
I just think the best DJ Lagway gets Florida to a ceiling of 15. And I think if you're going to be ranked 15th in the preseason, you need to have a higher ceiling than that. I guess you're trying to be right. And then the year, if you think they're 15th and they hit their ceiling, okay. They just weren't top 10. Sorry, I digress. I think Illinois should be 17 to 22nd. Give me that for Illinois. Lots of Kool-Aid for Indiana. They weren't top 25 last year. They're not top 25 this year. Boise State's not a top 25 team without Ashton Genty. I think that's pretty apparent to anyone that watches football. That was the sympathy one. Too low, Alex. Were there any teams that were too low for you?
I maybe could go Iowa State. Could be a little bit higher. I'm really interested to see them in week 0 against Kansas State. That's going to be really fun to watch. I'm not sure because I think with Ole Miss and Tennessee, it's what's going to happen at quarterback for either of those teams. Like I think if quarterback hits, I think they're going to be ranked higher. I think, but yeah, I think it's just so much uncertainty there. Like I was a little bit surprised Southern Cal wasn't ranked. I kind of figured just from a brand perspective, I thought they'd get into that 25 range, and they weren't even. I think they 26th, 7th, 8th, like 29th or 28th if we go by the votes or whatever. I kind of thought Louisville may sneak in there too in that 24, 25 range, but I mean, the thing is with that, like if you're a fringe, like kind of running that 25 team, it's you're basically right there, and one win can get you in. But as we all know, like preseason was early polls don't matter. What really matters is when you get into that playoff ranking standpoint.
I'm right there with you. I think Alabama's better than 8. I think that Kalen DeBoer is a heck of a coach. They have as much talent as anybody. Michigan, I think they're still too talented. I think they're too low. I mean, I'm nitpicking there, but they're better than 14th. Ole Miss, they're probably ranked correctly, but I like Lane Kiffin. I'm a Lane Kiffin guy. I think that he can get a lot out of his offenses. Not included, you kind of hit on some of them, Alex. I'm not going to stand on the chair for any one team that wasn't ranked. At the end of the year, there's going to be like 9 to 15 teams that weren't in the preseason poll that are in the final regular season poll. So all that will shift out over time or sift out over time. Do want to answer some questions here. There's one that it looks like to be getting some traction. Alex, at Under Armour, we've talked. I know we've talked about on different shows. It's been mentioned on the Big Spur. The only thing I can tell you is Under Armour has some deal where it's either last right of refusal or it's an opportunity to match. I don't think that Under Armour is in a financial position to truly match it. And with South Carolina entering into this era of finding a new official, what would you call it, Alex? Team gear, official licensed merchandise, apparel. Yeah. I mean, I think that if I'm the University of South Carolina with where Under Armour's at right now, I would go ahead and take a sure thing like Nike's money if they want to give it to me and not have to worry about bankruptcy in the future. But yeah, I don't foresee South Carolina sticking with Under Armour as of things stand right now. And my leader in the clubhouse is Nike.
Yeah, we'll see. Now, from an apparel standpoint, I thought was really interesting today was Tennessee going back to Adidas. I didn't realize it felt like they just went to Nike, honestly. But them going back to Adidas, I thought that was interesting. And we'll see just from a South Carolina perspective on all that.
Yeah, and it's going to come out. I mean, I don't think there's going to be rumblings, and at some point, it's going to become the worst kept secret. And like right now, we're just not there yet. I can't 100% say that it's going to be Nike, and that they won't let that get out for another couple of weeks. I would assume you want to get through the season without people, not buying Under Armour apparel. All right, so parting shots to get out of here, Alex. Look, and we might have some time for more Q&As. Really and truly, we might be able to do some more Q&As here. We just had a lot to get to tonight. But we are going to tease next week. Next week is our prediction. And Alex did not get the show notes from me until about an hour before the show. So not his fault, my fault.
I did not do my homework.
My real life job got in the way of my fun job, talking Gamecocks with all you guys late at night. But I'll give you guys my 2 early predictions. These are just some fun ones that I think actually have a really good shot of happening. I know Jaden Sellers catches at least 1 touchdown this year. Like I know it's going to happen. I don't know when it's going to come. But it's going to happen. Lenoris is going to have a touchdown to Jaden. But I'm going to go one step further. I think Jaden Sellers scores a touchdown 3 different ways this year. I think rushing, receiving, and special teams.
I'll give you one. I was thinking about special teams. South Carolina returns at least 2 returns for a touchdown, being a kickoff or punt return.
Yeah, Michael's reading my mind here. South Carolina State. LOL. Yeah, it's going to happen. I don't know what game it's going to happen. But no, I think you're right. I think there'll be multiple special teams this year for the Gamecocks.
And they're making that an emphasis too. Like you can't hear Shane talk about like they need that they want to be better from a return standpoint. So I think that's something that you're going to see with how much of an emphasis they're put on. And some of the guys you can see being back there, like Nick Harbor or those freshman receivers, Jared Brown, Dre Jacobs, any of those guys, like you feel like the pieces are kind of there to kind of do
Kari Swain. Yeah. All right, my last one, and this is kind of overarching for college football. All right, this year we see teams continue to abuse the injury timeout. And what's going to happen is the first week of the season, you're going to see either no penalties because no team's going to do it, or you're going to see a million penalties because the referees are going to be enforcing every little thing they think. But I guarantee you this, by game 6, 7, 8, when all the chips are on the table and this conference needs to have this team get in, or, how it's looking, I'm just telling you guys, I don't think the referees are corrupt, but I think when the moments get too big, the referees lean on the side of caution far too often. And I'm just telling you, injury timeouts are going to be a thing again this year, and it's going to suck because it's going to be when it matters most.
I mean, I just wonder how it's going to be enforced. Like I'm trying to remember the phrase they use for how they determine the speed you're getting off with. I can't remember what it was. But like, how are they going to determine like, oh yeah, that guy's not moving fast enough to get off it? Or I'm talking about from a substitution standpoint. Like, I think that's one.
Yeah, the substitution, that's the same thing. But I'm saying with the injury timeouts, like you're going to see appeals and you're going to see people saying like, I was taking the best action for me, but by me missing this quarter of football, then I lost out on the chance to put something on film to get drafted and make a million. It's going to be something stupid like that.
I agree with you. I think early on you see that try to be enforced, I think, but then as time moves on, like I'm not sure how you're going to enforce it.
Yeah, it's here to stay. Thank you, Lane Kiffin. We appreciate you for everything, even though I just said I was a Lane guy. All right, Alex, do you have another one off the cuff, or you want to save everything for next week?
Let's save it.
He doesn't want to be on the record.
I need a lot of time to think about all this.
Yeah, so really excited. Next week's going to be a lot of fun. I love doing the prediction episodes. We'll pick the conference winners, the Gamecock schedule. We might do some opponent schedules. We'll have fun with it. And then different things we think statistically that might happen, different, points of emphasis that we think the Gamecocks will, take part in this upcoming year. But Alex, any parting shots before we get out of here?
No, that was a really fun show. I think we, even went over a little bit over an hour. It was fun to talk about, especially from the future standpoint, seeing what all the, the foundation that's being built on both sides of the ball. And it's, our last kind of show for this summer, I guess, the summer segment of the show, where kind of just seeing what we can find things to talk about when it gets into talking season. But next week you get into that predictions, and then you get into week 0. And then before you know it, 2 weeks from now, we're going to be sitting here making predictions for week 1.
Yeah, and don't forget the most famous segment we have. We'll be back soon when Alex and I return with our best bet segment, which I beat Alex by 1 game last year.
I had such
I'm
a big
the reigning champion. But look, y'all. Thank you so much for being a part of the show tonight. We say it every episode, but when you give us your time, you give us the most valuable thing you have, and that means the world to both me and Alex. Definitely on the questions, keep them coming in. The more that we get questions, the more we can, tie it into the show. It's kind of hard to bring questions in between segments, but we love questions. So just like we love all of y'all being a part of the show, we want to answer your questions. Lastly, we're going to get out of here, y'all. We'll be back Wednesday at 8:00, and that just means we're going to be 1 week closer to football season. So have a safe rest of the week. Have a safe weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.